Hello, and welcome back to Dream Phonograph. Settle into our quiet corner, where history drifts by at the pace of your own breathing. Tonight, we're wandering through Ottoman Istanbul, a city that rose with the call to prayer and moved to the rhythm of water and stone. The air here is thick with the smell of bread and the gleam of brass, filled with the echo of oars and the great, hushing silence of domes that taught a whole city how to speak softly. If you find a little peace in these slow journeys, consider subscribing and joining our quiet community. That way, you'll never miss one of our midnight voyages. We love to know where you're listening from and what time it is in your part of the world. Each of you is a small, steady light on our growing map of calm. And now, let the room around you dim. Loosen the muscles in your jaw, let your shoulders fall, and feel the day recede like a tide, pulling gently away from the shore. Let your eyes drift closed whenever you're ready. Take a slow breath in as the city awakens to its first call, and a long breath out as a fountain pours silver into the evening dark. Allow the sounds of your own space to settle around you, and join us as we drift into the quiet, steady pulse of another world. A day in Ottoman Istanbul, where patience was the very craft that kept the city alive. The room is dark enough to unspool your thoughts. Air sighs against the shutters with the faintest tide, and you wake before the first call to prayer. In that moment, the city holds its breath. A quiet courtyard waits beyond the door, a strip of slate sky stretched above. In the hush, you can feel the shape of streets you do not yet know. You wash your face from a copper bowl, the water cool as river shade. Your own breath meets the air and slows. You step outside while the night still clings to the stone. The lane is narrow, the houses, timber and plaster, their eaves leaning toward each other like figures in a hushed conversation. The last lamps gutter low. Far off, a single gull tests the morning, and you taste a thread of wood smoke on the air. Down the slope, a small square is gathering its people in twos and threes. They aren't speaking, just standing near the fountain. The asterisk seshmi times its brass spout shining over a trough scrubbed clean. Buckets wait. Here, water carries time. You join the end of the small line and feel it adjust to you, not with impatience, but with the neatness of a shared habit. A boy in a wool cap traces a finger through the damp dust on a stone, then wipes it on his sleeve. A woman balances an empty clay jar against her hip, a perfect extension of her own form. A man in a dark turban nods once, a greeting that needs no more. The queue is a soft braid of neighbours and errands. You place your own bucket down, its metal ringing softly against the stone. The first pour is a ribbon of silver in the gloom. When it strikes the wood of a bucket, it makes a sound like a muted bell, and that sound gives the square its centre. The fountain wall is worn smooth by palms that have steadied themselves here for generations, its carved patterns holding little pools of shadow. A small bird drops to the lip for a sip and is gone. When your turn comes, you watch the water's surface tremble and settle. You learn by copying. Left hand steadies, right hand lifts. A cloth catches a stray drip. The bucket slides aside for the next person with the simple grace of a bow. Courtesy lives in these small motions. Somewhere nearby, a door opens and shuts with care. In a window, a wick brightens. The day announces itself with sound first, not by a clock. You hear the creak of a wooden yoke, a Times Saka asterisk. A water carrier passes with twin skins on his shoulders, his steps small and practiced to keep the weight from jolting. He greets the line not with words but with a lift of his chin, and you return the gesture. It is enough. You are learning a language of economy and tact, one that asks very little of the mouth. The air tastes faintly of earth and soap. Tucked under the eaves, a cat watches with the self-possession of someone in another profession entirely. You look up, and the strip of sky has gained a paler edge, almost blue. With both hands on the bucket's handle, you feel the wood press into your fingers, the metal ring as cool as a coin. This small square knows this hour and does not hurry it. Time here is poured, carried, and shared. It doesn't tick so much as murmur. When voices finally arrive, they sound like a secret being passed along. Two men talk quietly about bread, about the oven down the road, the weight, the measure, the words times arksi times, and kilo float, soft as crumbs. It's not an argument, just the small adjustments of planning a day, and you feel the city's bones take shape around you. The bakery with its regulated loaves, the scales that are inspected, the prices posted where they must be. You realize that even these rules are part of how the city lets its people rest inside what is known. You carry your bucket home along a path that grips your shoes and then lets go. A door swings inward over a threshold, smoothed by decades of heels. Inside, the air is warmer. A lamp brings the copper bowl to a gentle shine. You pour a little water to wash your hands, and the sound is a breath let out. From somewhere deep in the neighborhood, a single voice rises, holding a note that seems to find the wood in the walls and the space in your own chest. The first call to prayer gathers its answers from other mosques in the distance. The sound isn't urgent, it's a map written on the air. You stand perfectly still, listening as the call moves across the city, one voice joining another. The lanes outside accept its shape, and you accept it too, without needing to be told. This is how people agree on mourning. You feel your own body settle inside the pattern, softening. The light in the window is now the color of pale linen. A kettle on a small stove whispers and clicks. You tear a piece of yesterday's bread and warm it over the flame, not rushing, just turning it until it smells faintly of toast. When you step outside again, a different quiet has settled, like water in a bowl after the ripples have gone. The fountain square has emptied, a dark stain on the stone marking where water was spilled. You run your fingers along the carved edge, and the stone returns your touch with a cool, chalky calm. A woman you saw earlier walks by, her filled jar balanced on her shoulder. She doesn't look strained. She moves as if the jar is part of a conversation her body has had so often it has become a friendship. You try to match her pace. Small step, pause, small step. The gulls are more certain now, their cries brief and declarative over the rooftops. Somewhere, a coppersmith's hammer tests a single note and is answered by another. Then both fall quiet, as if the city has checked its instruments and set them down again. You pull your sleeve over your wrist against the last of the chill and look toward the slope that leads to the sea. You can smell it now, a thread of brine, tar, and damp rope. Boats will be moving there soon. You will go there, too, once the light has fully set the day in motion. For now, though, you are learning the rule that makes all the rest possible, that waiting is not a failure here, but a craft. You feel what a queue can be when it's built not on scarcity, but on a respect for taking one's turn. You feel how a square can belong to an hour, rather than the hour belonging to the square. It is early, and nothing dramatic has happened, yet you feel a pleasant weariness, the kind that comes from listening with your whole body. It's the good fatigue of learning a new kind of balance. Returning, you run a hand along your door's wooden frame, its grain carrying the faint, oily scent of years. The room holds its gentle dimness. You set the bucket beside the bowl and watch the water's surface go still. When you sit, you don't bounce back up. You let the stool take your full weight. In the first light, your thoughts have found the same pace as the square. Slow, careful, as if each one is a vessel being filled and lifted away. If you were to last a day here, this is how you would do it, by letting the city lend you its breath and its patience. The call to prayer fades. The square is just stone, and the faint sound of water again. You close your eyes for a moment, and the inside of your eyelids is the color of the sky's first light. You think of hands on stone, of buckets, of the nod that needs no words, and you breathe out. The next sounds, the louder ones, will come soon enough. For now, the city and you are on the same gentle plane, holding the same note, which is almost silence. You stand in the doorway and let the city speak for itself. The first notes have already crossed the roofs. Now others answer, measured and sure, as if the domes themselves breathe. The call isn't a shout. It's a long line drawn in the air, and other lines meet it, not quite in unison, so that the sound makes a soft braid over the hill. You don't watch a clock. You listen for distance and nearness, for echo and hush, for the way a voice rests against stone and slides along water. From one quarter, you hear a muezzin whose tone leans warm, almost like a reed. From another, the voice is dry as parchment and precise. You learn the map by these differences. Fatih's height gives a stretch to the note. Down by the golden horn, the sound is shorter, rounded by mist. Across the inlet, Galata answers from its ridge, distant yet clear, as if the words have been sifted by gulls. It's the same call, and every voice is its own door. You open each, one, by listening. The lane below begins to move. A shutter lifts, leaving a bar of honey light across a step. Someone pours water gently down a stoop and brushes the sill. In a corner, a boy coils a rope he left there last night. These are small chores, but they take their pace from something larger and calmer than haste. You are not required. You are invited. If you walk now, you step into a current rather than push against it. A man touches a string of wooden beads once, twice, and slips them into a pocket. An old woman folds a scarf carefully, turning the fabric so its border pattern aligns with itself. A baker passes, carrying a paddle and the clean scent of flour on his sleeves. He moves without theatrics, but the city moves around him, preparing to receive what he will make. The call continues, and with it the order of the morning deepens, lanes pointing towards squares, squares toward ovens, ovens toward hands and scales. You follow the sound uphill to a small mosque whose courtyard palms meet the stone where so many have leaned. The gate is open. Inside the wall, a clock you cannot see keeps a quiet measure. An alcove houses instruments that read the sun's angle when the day is older. There's a room for timekeeping in bigger complexes, you've been told. A place where a careful person watches light and shadow to keep the calls accurate, adjusting by season and sky. The word for the keeper is different from the caller. Their work is to understand the city's length of breath and to set it gently. You don't enter the prayer hall. You remain in the courtyard, under a cypress whose bark smells faintly of resin. Pigeons step and tilt their heads, as if they, too, are reading the air. The fountain here whispers over a stone lip, offering a coolness that makes your fingers ache with relief when you trail them through. Footsteps soften on the paving. There is no hurry and no slackness, only a tempo that matches the work of noticing. When the call finishes, the silence that replaces it isn't empty. It's a new shape for other sounds to fit into. A seller tests his voice, chestnuts later. Not now and then, lets it rest. A cart hub ticks as it cools in the shade. You feel the day settle like a cloth pulled smooth over a table. If you were holding anything tightly, you aren't anymore. On the walk back down, the alleys look changed, though the houses are the same. The angle of light has lowered, softening the grain in the wood and the chalk in the plaster. You pass a door where a child practices letters with a slate and a stub of chalk. The strokes make a powdery hiss, left to right, then right to left for another script entirely. A neighbor greets him in Greek. His mother answers in Ottoman Turkish, gently correcting his posture with a hand on his shoulder. Language isn't a wall here. It's a set of paths, some shared, some parallel, all close enough to wave across. At a corner, an apprentice balances a tray with cups nested in rings of brass. The cups are empty. He carries them, as you might carry a plan. Practical, plain, meant for many hands. He nods to you, and to a porter whose harness creaks when he shifts his weight. Two men pause to decide the order of their morning, and you hear again that soft word, asterisk, axe, asterisk, in a sentence about flour and a measure to be checked at the oven. No one rushes the decision. A choice made quickly, here is a choice that must be remade. Better to let the call's evenness linger in your voice and your steps. You pause above the water. The inlet is a long mirror dabbed by oars. Each strike draws a faint seam that widens, loosens, and then is gone. The opposite bank looks nearer than it did at dawn. That's the work of sound, to shorten a distance without moving anything. A kayık slides under a beam of light that has found a gap between two roofs. The boatman raises an oar in greeting to no one in particular, and then rows on. The rhythm is the same one you've been feeling since the first note. Steady, human, kind to the muscles. If you try to count the calls in memory, you lose the thread and find yourself counting birds instead. This isn't a place to count. It's a place to measure by feeling, by the time it takes water to settle in a cup, by the time it takes a hand to fold a cloth, by the length of a breath between a question and an answer. The instruments in the alcove at the mosque have their mathematics. Yours, for now, are made of warmth, echo, and the weight of your own steps. Near the market lane, a man sets down a small case and opens it to reveal a compass and a square, polished from use. He checks an angle where the sun has caught, then shuts the case with a click that sounds like a decision. He isn't the muezzin, not the timekeeper, not the baker, and yet he works within the same grid of care. The city is a net laid over the day. Each knot is a person doing one thing well. You sit on a low wall and watch the light climb a doorway until it reaches the lintel and stops. That small event marks the passage of time as surely as any chime. A woman adjusts her veil against the brightness and passes without looking down, certain of the stones underfoot. You pull your sleeve over your wrist again, but this time not for the cold. It's a habit now, part of a new etiquette of comfort. You weren't taught, but have learned by watching. When a new voice rises later in the morning, from farther off you recognize it without meaning to. The line of the call is now a street you know how to walk. Work opens fully. The baker's door is propped. The first loaves move into arms and baskets. The scales wait like small brass moons for their share of attention. Time has been arranged, not by numbers, but by agreements. You are inside those agreements now, and the day feels less like an obstacle and more like a river you can cross by stepping stones. You lift yourself from the wall and breathe as the city breathes. If you had tried to press your will upon the morning, you would be tired by now, in a hard way. As it is, your tiredness is soft and even, like the weight of a blanket, and it holds you kindly. This is how the city means to carry you through its hours, by voice, by echo, by the slow calibration of your own senses to its measured grace. Heat gathers in the lane as if the stones themselves are remembering an old instruction. You smell flour before you see the oven, a clean, dry scent that sits high in the nose, then a deeper note of wood and a sweetness like warmed husk. The doorway is low and dark. Inside, an orange quiet breathes. A paddle slides, the long board whispering against brick. You wait at the threshold and let your eyes soften until shapes choose to appear. The baker's sleeves are rolled, flour a soft fog along his forearms. He sets a rounded loaf on a cloth, and the crust clicks as it settles. Another man, careful and unhurried, lifts a brass weight from a wooden box and places it on one pan of a scale. The pans are thin, the chains polished where they rub. He balances a wedge of bread on the other pan and watches the tremor pass through the needle until it stands where it should. Nothing is dramatic, everything is exact. You take a half step closer and feel the warmth as a soft wall. The oven mouth yawns slightly to one side. A boy feeds split, sticks into the firebox, and closes the door with a motion he has practiced until it is almost sleep. In the corner, a sheet of paper lists numbers and words you read slowly. Weights, prices, kinds of bread. A small seal marks the bottom. The word for such a posted list is ****, and it settles the city like a steady hand on a shoulder. Prices do not have to be invented anew each morning. They are agreed, watched, adjusted when the season or the grain demands. When it is your turn, you say less than you might, because the exchange here is not built from talk. Your palm meets the counter's polished edge. The baker lifts a loaf times somen asterisk. The word says itself when you see its shape and tips it so that you can see the crust. He does not hurry your glance. He weighs it again because he weighs everything, not as suspicion, but as habit. The needle steadies. The loaf comes to your hands, and the heat says good morning without sound. A man beside you counts out coins that are dull with use. Silver times, axe times, slides from his fingers to the counter and rests there with a small, well-travelled ring. He does not drop them. He sets them down like a story told without embellishment. The baker nods and wraps a second loaf, his gestures as gentle as those of someone tending a sleeping child. Behind him, the paddle goes in, comes out, goes in. The oven inhales, exhales. Outside, under a small awning, the scales have moved to a stool. A young woman checks a loaf's weight as a matter of course. The balance shows what it must, and she smiles, not as a customer securing a victory, but as a neighbor confirming that things are still in their right places. An older man, inspector, neighbor, both, looks on with the calm face of a person who has seen this done properly for years. When he meets your eye, he does not interrogate. He simply exists as a point of stillness against which the scene keeps perfect time. You take your bread to the side and break a corner. Steam drifts, then vanishes. The crumb is pale, a net of tiny rooms. The crust gives with a sound that feels like satisfaction travelling down the fingers. You let the first bite sit on your tongue longer than you would at home. The flour has a season in it, a weather. If you were to name the taste, you would need to know rain that fell months ago and how the miller angled his stones. At the end of the counter, a pair of boys practice the motions that will one day be theirs. One sets a weight and waits. The other pretends to cut a piece and places an imaginary wedge. Then they both hold very still until the invisible needle stills. When they cannot help laughing, it is a soft laugh aimed at the floor. The baker looks over and does not scold. The scales have already taught what they were meant to teach, even without bread on them. A porter adjusts his backstrap and takes delivery for a lane that buys together. He sets the wide tray upon his head with the grace of geometry, one palm steadying the air just beneath the wood, not touching, only knowing where the center is. He moves as a moving scale, slight corrections in the ankle, a shout to no one, breath even. The loaves do not slide, the loaves do not need to. The city is built of such couturied balances, most of them made of hands. You watch a small conversation you do not fully understand. Quiet questions that become a lesson. A woman points to the list and asks a question about flour. The baker answers by lifting a small cloth to show a tub of finer meal. The inspector nods, touches a weight with one fingertip, says a word you recognize as measure, and the woman nods in return. The moment closes like a book put back on its shelf. It is not adversarial. It is how the shop breathes in and out. On the walk away, your fingers shine slightly with oil from the crust. You hold the loaf in one hand, and with the other, you carry a little paper twist of sesame to scatter on top. Bought from a boy who measured the seeds by a pinch. He then checked against a tiny bronze weight because that is what one does. Even play here is pulled gently toward accuracy. The play does not mind. At a corner, a coppersmith taps a line around a shallow pan that will become a scale. The blows are light, spaced, then light again, as if he is reading a poem laid in metal. In the doorway behind him, on a beam, hangs an old balance with a missing chain. He has not mended it, because people sometimes look at it and remember. The memory is part of the work. He bows his head a fraction when you pause, a greeting without words, given and returned. You think of other kinds of measurement you carry. Numbers on screens, alarms, units, graphs. They seem less certain here. Not because they are wrong, but because they do not join your hand to the loaf in this way. When the inspector's shadow crosses the awning, it is only the shadow of someone who stands for a simple version of fairness. The presence is enough. A posted list, a scale, a hand that knows the weight by feel and checks anyway. This is a way of resting too, and you feel its relief in your shoulders. At a bench under a fig tree, you eat the quieter half of the bread. Pigeons step around your shoes, careful and polite. A cat considers the scene and then looks away, as if agreeing that things are in order. The bench smells of sap and sun. When you stand, you leave a crumb and watch it fall without regret. The crumb is a measure, too, of what you have learned and what you are carrying forward. Not only the taste, but the tempo that makes eating a form of listening. You wrap the remaining half in cloth, press it to feel its warmth, and place it under your arm as gently as you would cradle a book that must not be bent. The lane widens toward the market, where other balances wait spices, copper, leather, and you are ready for them. Warmed and steadied, your steps finding the city's slow arithmetic again, sum by sum, breath by breath. The alley gives up and spits you out into the light. Down at the slope's end, a jumble of masts and awnings sketches out a low-slung skyline, and the water is a rumpled page someone's already scribbled on. Before you can even say hello, the air hits you. A potent cocktail of tar, damp rope, wet wood, and a ghost of citrus from someone who just lost a fight with an orange. Men built like small tugboats navigate the crowd without a single bump, a skill you immediately envy. A porter unloads a massive frame from his back, leaning it against a bollard the colour of stewed tea, a silent partner in his exhaustion. You step onto a wooden landing that heaves a gentle, boozy sigh with the tide. The kayaks, those long-bellied, colourfully painted rowboats, are bobbing with a kind of practised nonchalance, their oarlocks worn pale from decades of woody conversations. A boatman in a wool cap that's seen better decades gives a curt nod toward an empty seat. He doesn't offer a hand, doesn't beckon you forward. He just creates a void and waits. The unspoken rule is clear. Wobbly passengers make for wet passengers, and he's not here for that. You lower yourself in, hands splayed out, committing your weight to the planks like you're trying to placate a moody beast. The boatman, who smells faintly of wood smoke and quiet confidence, stows a coil of rope with the kind of no-fuss motions that could probably defuse a bomb. Another passenger, an older gentleman with a neatly trimmed beard, places a small wooden box at his feet, nods to everyone, and settles in without so much as a creak. The final passenger arrives in a breathless hurry, only to stop dead at the edge, synchronizing his breathing with the boat's gentle rock. Only then does he step aboard, heel to toe, as if remembering some ancient unwritten rule. Here, you don't rush the boat rushes you. With a quiet scrape and a decisive shove, you're free. The boatman pulls a couple of short strokes, then 3 long ones, and the bow lifts its chin in approval. The water zippers up behind you with a sound like tearing silk. Suddenly, the city's two halves, the grand old city and the bustling Galata, are facing off across a shimmering sheet of light, occasionally interrupted by a stray cloud. The oars find their rhythm, a steady, hypnotic beat that makes you want to count along, but you know better than to be that tourist. To your right, hills peel back to reveal domes and minarets, a skyline punctuated with deliberate grace. To your left, Galata's ridge is a tight cluster of roofs and chimneys, all seemingly holding their breath. The waterway is a scene of organized chaos. A ferry slices across on a diagonal. A smaller boat nudges under a pier to offload sacks tied up like neat little thoughts. Further out, a heavy barge sticks to its course, as if following a groove worn into the water just for it. Our boatman wears a mask of serene indifference. He's tracking the angle of every other boat. A raised hand from a man on the dock, the shadow of a cloud that can turn the water into a blinding mirror. His eyes barely move, but you get the feeling they're recording everything. When a current nudges you sideways, he leans forward just a fraction, and the oars dig in without a whisper of complaint. This inlet may not be vast, but it's thick with gossip. You're now part of a tiny floating ecosystem built on trust. Wood trusts water, muscle trusts wood. You trust the rhythm. The harbour's scent deepens tar, rope, the clean, fish-skin tang of rinsed nets, and a sharp whiff of pickles from a nearby barrel. You let your face relax into a neutral, I belong here expression. You let your hands rest. The city is watching, not to judge, but to see if you fit. You either move with it, or you learn fast. A gull audits our progress for a moment, decides we're not interesting enough, and peels off. On another boat, a boy in a scarf far too big for him brandishes a fishing pole like a conductor's baton, trying to orchestrate the morning. Your boatman exchanges a single syllable with a friend in a passing kayak, a sound that's more a shared history than a greeting. The oars dip through a bar of shadow, then flash back into the sun. You notice the little tap the oar makes as it returns to the oarlock, like a finger answering a question. Halfway across, the boat just stops. Your boatman lets you drift, giving way to a ferry hauling what looks like the entire ocean's catch under a damp, mysterious shroud. He lifts a palm, a gesture devoid of emotion, and the ferry captain responds in the silent language of hulls, hissing past neatly. In the pause, you hear a church bell from Galata, and moments later, the call to prayer echoing from the old city. For a second, the two sounds meet in the air, have a brief, civilized chat, and go their separate ways. When you start moving again, the water feels different, lighter, though you know that's impossible. The boatman's oar work is a thing of beauty, a fluid motion a master tailor would admire. A breeze sneaks up your sleeve and finds your wrist. You gently pull the cloth back down, a small, discreet gesture you've already picked up from watching the locals. It's part of you now, this tiny economy of comfort. The thought of payment crosses your mind, but you know better than to ask. As the landing approaches, the boatman will execute a perfect turn, and a hand will appear, palm up. It's not a demand, it's a quiet statement that the journey is over. Coins aren't tossed, they're placed. The price is an unspoken agreement, a number worn smooth by custom. If there's a boatman's guild, and there must be, a union of calloused thumbs and keen eyes, it keeps the fare fair, enough for both bread and dignity. You watch a man in a felt cap step onto the narrow stern of another boat, his back to you. He isn't looking where he's going, he's watching the boatman's shoulder, as if its angle is the only compass he needs. Maybe it is. It occurs to you how little is said out loud here, and how perfectly everything is understood. The landing swims into focus, revealing its details. A cleat polished smooth by rope, an oil stain that has become part of the wood, the ghost of a brand burned in long ago. The boatman uses short, precise strokes to close the distance. There's no bump, no jolt. The hull just kisses the dock. Someone on the shore plucks the rope from the air and loops it over the cleat. A one-handed movement, so practiced, it's barely there. You stand only after the oars are laid to rest. The boatman's hand is there, and you place a coin in it, then another, one for the ride, and one for the way he paused for the ferry. He doesn't look at the money. He just gives a tiny nod that isn't about commerce, but about closure. The old man with the box disembarks next, his feet finding the planks without his eyes needing to. Back on solid ground, the city's rhythm changes. Men are lifting, coiling, sliding, each movement efficient and calm. You join the flow heading up a ramp where the smell of tar gives way to the welcome return of baking bread. You don't look back. The boat has already moved on. You've just stepped from the grammar of water to the grammar of stone, and you feel for a moment perfectly fluent in both. Galata's streets tilt upwards immediately, its houses leaning in and out in a conversation of their own. You carry the boat's steady rhythm in your legs, and it seems to flatten the hill. Had you tried to rush, this slope would have fought you every step. But as it is, you're just someone who has crossed over, and the memory of the crossing, that quiet, steadying beat, is still moving inside you. You roll up to the gate, and the whole world seems to hold its breath. Or maybe that's just you, trying not to look like a tourist. The pale stone walls rise up, seeming to calm the very light that hits them, and long cypress shadows stretch across the gravel, like they're tired of standing. The first courtyard doesn't just appear, it reveals itself in stages, a sweep of green, paths that weave and wander, and low buildings that look like they're eavesdropping. You enter the same way you've navigated the rest of the city. Watch first, then walk like you belong there, hoping the ground doesn't call your bluff. People drift by without any particular hurry. A janissary, one of the elite guards, loiters near the path, holding a spear so casually it's basically a fashion accessory. a very pointy, don't try anything stupid accessory. His turban is folded just so, his coat is spotless, and his whole vibe is a masterclass in how to be intimidating without making a sound. A clerk shuffles past, clutching a scroll that has permanently molded to the shape of his hand. A gardener gently prods at some gravel a cartwheel had the audacity to mess up. Here, even fixing things is a quiet, contemplative art. To your left is an old church, Hagia Irene, a historical relic, folded right into the palace grounds like a forgotten bookmark. To your right, a line of shade points you toward the next gate, where two towers stand like a pair of judgmental eyebrows. This is the Gate of Salutation, which sounds friendly enough, and just beyond it, the chimneys of the imperial kitchens stand in a perfect row, promising that someone, somewhere, is making a truly epic lunch. You don't just waltz through, of course. For now, you just get to stand where countless others have stood, petitioners, messengers, and probably a few guys with catering deliveries. Under a small awning, a scribe sharpens his pen with a tiny gleaming knife. His desk is a whole universe in miniature, an inkwell, a little pot of sand for drying, and a seal that looks like a napping cat. He glances up, gives you a 1-second appraisal that says everything that needs to be said, which is, "I'm busy," and looks back down. When you finally get the nod, you step through the gate and the air immediately cools, as if the stones themselves are running the air conditioning. This second court is wider, yet somehow feels more personal. On one side, those kitchen chimneys rise like organ pipes, the source of food for thousands. If you're patient, you can pick out the smells on the breeze. Rice, a savory broth, and a hint of sweetness from the confectioners, where sugar is currently being bullied into artistic new forms. You can practically taste the air. An attendant glides past with a covered tray, balancing it so perfectly it might as well be glued to his hands. You politely step aside. Another man crosses the courtyard, hugging a ledger to his chest like it contains the secrets to the universe. All around them, columns hold up a roof and a whole lot of cool, refreshing shade. Shade here isn't just a lack of sun. It's a carefully managed resource, doled out in sensible portions. On the other side are the rooms where the real work happens. Councils, record keeping, the management of money and grain. A door opens and closes with a click, as neat and final as a gavel. You get the feeling that conversations in there are less about chit-chat and more about precise measurements. It's not drama. It's the slow, patient engine of bureaucracy at work. You don't need to go any further to the innermost court to get the point. Each gate you pass through filters out more people and cranks up the silence. It's a system designed to turn a bustling crowd into a single, purposeful individual. If you tried to rush, the gravel itself would tattle on you, its crunching under your feet a scolding reminder. Asterisk, slow down asterisk. A breeze drifts by, whispers, cinnamon, and then ghosts you. From the kitchens, you hear the satisfying clank of lids, the percussion section of the palace lunch rush. You watch a couple of porters carry a massive cauldron, moving so perfectly in sync they seem to be guided by an invisible choreographer made of pure balance. The pot doesn't even slosh. A boy walks by with a bundle of herbs, and when a leaf escapes, he snatches it out of the air with a sly little smile. He's already learned the golden rule here. Look busy, be efficient, and don't waste the merchandise. Near a column, a soldier meticulously rewraps his turban. You realize the whole place communicates in this subtle code of conduct. Nothing is spelled out in giant, flashing letters. It's all about a nod here, a folded cloth there, a silent understanding of who belongs where. It's kind of exhausting, but you start to get the hang of it. When you leave the second court for the outer one again, the world feels huge and loud. The first courtyard, once so serene, now feels like a town square. The birds are back, a wheel is squeaking its heart out, and the gardener is taking a well-earned water break. You tap the gate on your way out, not for luck, just because the stone is cool and feels ancient. Outside, the city's roar returns. The palace seems grand, not just because it's big, but because it takes all that chaos and tames it into a quiet, orderly, and probably very well-fed machine. You realize you wouldn't last a day in there. You talk too much and walk too fast. But for a little while, you got to practice the fine art of shutting up and slowing down, a lesson the gravel would surely approve of. You know, your morning is a chaotic mess until a giant pile of stone decides to sort it out for you. You trudge up a hill towards a grand mosque that holds itself with the serene posture of a ship at anchor. The entire city seems to lean in its direction, as if for a reassuring pat on the back. You wander into the courtyard, a perfect square of sunlight, bordered by cool shade. At its heart, a fountain murmurs to itself, tossing up threads of water that fall back down like someone gently lowering a rope. Without even thinking, you slow down. The building gives you no choice. It's mandatory relaxation. From the high and mighty Palace Hill, you drift through quieter streets until you're standing before the mosque. Its colonnades stretch out long, dark stripes of shadow. The tops of the columns are a riot of carved leaves, offered up for your viewing pleasure without the slightest pressure to identify them. A kid steps from the bright sun into the shade and, like magic, his voice drops to a respectful whisper. You press your palm against a column under the portico. It's cooler than the air. The stone doesn't budge, of course, but the solid touch somehow unknots something tight in your chest. You're not here to solve a puzzle. You're stepping into a room that's an expert in chilling people out. Over at the fountain, a man rinses his hands with such incredible efficiency, you'd think each drop was individually invoiced, not a single splash. Another man carefully unrolls his sleeves, smoothing the fabric once, then twice, before picking up his shoes. A pair of pigeons are conducting some very solemn pigeon business on the paving stones, their heads bobbing in perfect time with the fountain. All the little sounds of the courtyard seem to get collected, softened, and handed back to you, as if the stone has rounded off all their sharp edges. You stand at the entrance to the prayer hall, letting your eyes adjust to the sheer scale of it. The doorway frames a space so vast it should be shocking, but instead, it's just calm. A massive dome opens above you like a held breath, with smaller semi-domes stepping down on either side, like ushers guiding you to the main event. A huge ring of lamps hangs from the base of the dome on chains, a whole constellation brought down to eye level. They're not even on, but just seeing them there, so orderly and patient, seems to warm the air. A man places his shoes neatly side by side and steps onto the carpet, which accepts him with a soft, muffled sound of agreement. Somewhere inside, a page turns. You decide not to go any further, content to watch from the line where shoes and the dust of the day must wait. You listen to what the dome does with sound. It doesn't just bounce it back at you. It catches a word, holds it for a slow breath, and then returns it softer, the way a good friend repeats what you've said when you need to hear it again, but kindly. You try a whisper. It travels much further than you'd expect. Not louder, just incredibly clear. A cough from the other side of the hall arrives not as a harsh bark, but as something neatly folded. This, you realize, is the building's secret weapon, its profound courtesy. It teaches you how to behave just by being itself. If you were to shout in here, the walls wouldn't punish you with a deafening echo. They'd just gently fuzz the sound until you got the hint and tried a different tone. It's architecture as a conversation, with the stone politely suggesting a better way to speak. You take the long way around the portico, reading the building in small doses. Here, a band of calligraphy, so elegant it looks like it was written in slow motion. There, a honeycombed niche that catches the light in dozens of tiny caves before releasing it as a soft, dappled glow. A wooden door is carved with a pattern that looks like a calm debate angles, meeting, parting, and agreeing to meet again. If you were in a rush, this would all just be decoration. In your current state, it feels like a user manual for a more peaceful life. From the far side of the courtyard, the city is chopped up into framed pictures. A slice of silvery water between two columns, a street no wider than a ribbon, a distant chimney drawing a perfectly straight line through a cloud. You sit on a step and feel the stone soaking up the day's warmth, holding it for you. The dome isn't heavy above you. It's shelter, the way a hand cupped around a flickering flame is shelter. The sharp edges of the world seem to round off just a little. You take a breath. The imam glides by with a greeting that's less a word and more a general feeling of goodwill. An attendant with a small broom and a brass dustpan performs a cleaning task so delicately it looks like performance art. At the edge of the portico, two students are hunched over a book, one finger tracing a line, the other person nodding. Nobody is racing. Here, learning seems to move at the same tempo as the staircase, the arch, and the falling water. You look up again and think about the other great domes across the city, each one a different masterpiece by the same architect. It's like the city trusted this one guy with its skyline, and now you're learning to trust him with your sense of calm. Even if you didn't know his name, you'd know the feeling. The way your shoulders seem to level out in his courtyards, the way you start to filter out the street noise from the profound quiet that's waiting just one gate away. A boy walks by carrying a small tray with two cups that clink like a tiny muted bell. He moves with such care that the liquid in each cup remains perfectly still. He places the tray in a patch of shade with the precision of someone planting a flag on a newly discovered continent. An older man reaches for a cup, pauses to adjust the handle just so, and then drinks with an attention so focused it's almost a prayer. The dome seems to hold this small ceremony too, making it feel as essential to the place as the stone itself. A breeze shuffles a few leaves along the outer wall. From somewhere beyond, a hammer taps out a few notes, and the courtyard accepts the sound like a visitor from out of town. You listen for the city, and it's there, but muffled and made friendly. If there's a reason you couldn't last a day here, it's not the building's fault. It's your own twitchy impulse to fill every silence before you've had a chance to hear what it's trying to say. This place is slowly, gently, curing you of that. You get up and walk the portico one last time. Between the columns, the city reassembles itself in a new, cleaner order. Water, roof, tree, sky. You feel like you're memorizing it, writing it on the inside of your wrist. At the gate, you pause and look back. The dome doesn't loom or follow you. It just rests where it is, holding the same promise for whoever comes next. That a voice can be softened without being silenced, that an hour can be stretched without being emptied, and that a person can be laid gently against the day and still get back up whole. On the steps outside, your feet find their sound again, but it's a different sound now, measured, courteous, almost shy. The hill slopes down to other streets, other noises, other kinds of breathing. You descend as if you've just learned how to carry a jar of water on your head, spine straight, gaze kind, with a new rhythm that has room for small mistakes. The architect's work stays with you for a while, a dome-shaped quiet tucked under your ribs, riding along until the city demands your attention again, most likely with a taxi horn aimed directly at your soul. The adventure begins, as most good stories do, with a slightly dramatic wooden door. Its sides open, and you step into a soaring room centered around a pool of light, the domed ceiling dotted with what look like tiny glass eyes, all watching. The air is a pleasant mix of warm stone, soap, and something herby, olive, and laurel, apparently. Voices are hushed, as if every word is being carefully swaddled in linen before being released. First things first, ditch the shoes. You're handed a pair of wooden clogs, times Nalan times, that make you feel instantly taller and significantly less stable. Next, the times pestimal asterisk, a striped cloth you're meant to artfully knot at your waist. Yours ends up looking less ancient Roman and more precariously balanced beach towel. But hey, when in a Turkish bath, this first room is airy and calm. Benches line the walls, and little nooks hold brass bowls stacked like moons waiting for their turn to shine. The floor is warm, heated by some unseen magical plumbing. An attendant gives you a nod that perfectly balances, "I am a wise guardian of this sacred space, and I've seen it all, buddy." He hands you a metal basin, a Tars times, with a steadiness that seems to flow right into your wrists. You take a deep breath of the steam, and your shoulders finally decide to drop an inch or two. You shuffle from warm to warmer, passing through a door into the Times Hararet asterisk, the hot room. The world dissolves into a luminous, steamy blur. The marble floor radiates a deep heat that seeps into your calves and straight to your bones. In the center, a huge, heated slab, the Times Göbek Taşı asterisk or belly stone, glows faintly, worn smooth as satin by centuries of bathers. You lie down on it, feeling a bit like a pancake on a griddle, but in the best possible way. The stone somehow coaxes your spine into a position it hasn't seen since before you discovered slouching. Your breathing finds a new rhythm, a little longer in, a little longer out. Small fountains in the walls offer up water in delicate streams, their brass taps responding to the lightest touch. You ladle a bowlful over your arm, and a fresh veil of heat rises. The water trickles away into channels, ticking softly as it goes. Above, the star-like glass lenses in the dome scatter pale coins of light through the steam. It feels like you've stepped inside a giant, cozy lantern. Just when you're about to melt into a puddle of pure relaxation, an attendant appears. He doesn't ask if you're ready, he just times knows asterisk. He sees your boneless shoulders and limp hands and approaches with a Times Kesa asterisk, a rough mitt with the texture of a cat's tongue and the exfoliating power of a sandblaster. He gestures for you to turn, and you obey. The first few scrubs are light, just mapping the territory. Then he gets down to business. It's not painful, just thorough. You start to see little grey rolls of, well, you. It's strangely satisfying, like shedding a whole year's worth of bad decisions. He pauses to douse you with water, poured so expertly it feels like silk. Then comes the soap. This isn't your sad little bar from home. This is a glorious, frothy mountain of bubbles, piled on you until you look like a misplaced cloud. His hands are efficient, the movements pass down through generations. He lifts your arm as if it weighs exactly what it should, and no more. You turn when he taps the air above your shoulder, and the belly stone releases a wave of heat it had been saving just for you. Time gets a bit wobbly in here. Is it Tuesday? Have you been here for an hour or a week? The only clocks are the drip of water and the low murmur of two guys nearby, continuing a conversation that sounds like it started in the Ottoman Empire. Eventually, you sit up. The world does a little swim, then steadies. The attendant rinses your hair with the care of someone washing their favorite teacup. He leaves silence in all the right places, and when he's gone, you press your cheek against the stone for a moment longer, feeling the building's slow, warm heartbeat. When rising feels like the most natural thing to do, you make your way back through the warm room to a cooler annex. You sit by a basin, ladling water over your knees and feet. Your skin hums a low, happy yes. A bowl of crushed laurel leaves sits next to a soap dish, its green, ancient scent filling the air. Your fingers smell like a secret garden. On a nearby bench, a boy expertly wraps a towel into a perfect turban and looks immensely pleased with himself. An older man adjusts his own waistcloth with the practiced calm of someone who's done this 1,000 times. Their conversation is light, probably about nothing more serious than the optimal temperature of a corner nook. This isn't just lounging, it's essential maintenance for the body and soul. Back in the large, airy changing hall, a draft from a high window feels like a cool kiss on your damp skin. People sit around in relaxed circles, towels draped over their shoulders, hair wet, eyes blissfully half closed. One man sips a sherbet, the crushed ice tinkling in his glass like a tiny bell. The attendant who scrubbed you reappears with a towel, warmed on a rail, and drapes it over your shoulders as if he's returning a long-lost cape. You thank him with a nod as you stand to meet its comforting weight. You dress slowly, as if the act itself is a form of gratitude. Your clothes seem to soak up the room's warmth, holding a gentler version of it for you. You catch your reflection. You look shiny and surprisingly serene, like someone who has just been told a very good secret and also had all their pores deep cleaned. At the door, you leave some coins in a small dish. You add a little extra because that soap cloud was magnificent and the man with the scratchy mitt successfully scrubbed off last winter. He doesn't count it, just gives a nod that says, "Go forth and be clean." Outside, the city's noise feels different, softer on your new skin. The wind catches the clean scent of laurel and carries it ahead of you like a tiny announcement. You get it now. You carry the warmth with you, a little furnace under your ribs, ready to face whatever traffic jam or email avalanche the world has waiting. The market shrinks to a single lane of work, all happening at about chest height. You're not so much walking as you are being carried along by a current of hands. You know where one shop ends and the next begins not by a wall, but by a change in the soundtrack. A hammer's bright, optimistic tapping gives way to the intimate whisper of cloth being drawn between fingers, which then fades into the wet, heavy breathing of a dye vat being stirred. Forget Yelp reviews. Here, you navigate by ear and nostril. At the coppersmiths, bowls ring out once, a clear, perfect note, before settling into their forever sound. The master, the times Usta times, plucks a finished piece with 2 fingertips, as if testing the weight of a story he's told 1,000 times. His number 2, the times Kalfa times, slaps the next sheet of metal into place, while the apprentice, the asterisk, Churak times, wets the edge that's about to be taught a lesson in bending. A foreman, the times Yitbashu asterisk, glides past with a glance that confirms what he already knew. Everything is fine. Nobody shouts. Each person is a hand on a clock, and together they keep a time the whole lane can set its watch to. Across the way, a tailor measures a sleeve, not with a tape, but with a cord marked by a cryptic series of knots. He lays the fabric on a board, scarred with the ghosts of 1,000 past cuts. His shears are heavy, serious things. They open and close with a sound like a gentle but legally binding promise. The guild steward, his Times Cthulhu asterisk, pops his head in the door, does a quick scan that involves 0 actual counting, and leaves. The counting has already been done. You see, spread across 100 mornings, and baked into the simple fact that the cloth pile is exactly as low as it's supposed to be. In a cool doorway, a set of wooden measures lean against the wall like an awkward family portrait. Bushels, little scoops, a long dipper for oil. Each has a small seal burned into its side. A man from the inspector's office, the Times Mutesib asterisk's enforcer, runs a thumb over one, not as a threat, but just to feel that the official mark is still there, proud and unfaked. He gives a tight, toothless smile. The shopkeeper's breathing doesn't even hitch. His measures are true. He keeps them that way because a clear conscience is the best sleep aid money can't buy. You pause at a dyer's, where steam billows over a stone lip and turns a hazy blue in the afternoon light. A great pole turns, and a bolt of cloth rises from the depths, heavy, dripping, and as patient as a creature at feeding time. The smell is sharp, clean, and could probably strip paint. The dyer's palms are permanently stained with the memory of 1,000 rinses. He gives the apprentice a slight nod, and the boy heaves the cloth onto a line, back straight, eyes focused. A tiny blue river trickles down a channel in the floor and vanishes into a drain the lane has collectively agreed not to think too much about. This, you realize, is what a guild is. It's not a stuffy boardroom, but a braid. Master, journeyman, and apprentice, all woven together with stewards and foremen. It's the inspector, who knows everyone's kids by name, and the annual festival, where all the trades parade through the streets to prove that the city is both many and one. You overhear someone talking about the last procession like it was a spectacular meal. Floats of craft turned theatre, mobile ovens, a giant mechanical fish with a working jaw, and tailors who, for a laugh, stitch the air itself with thread of gold. At the edge of the lane, a stranger is laying out spoons on a cloth. His accent is definitely not from around here. The spoons are light, shiny, and clearly not guild approved. A neighbour wanders over, admires one, then points toward the steward's shop with 2 fingers, a masterclass in polite redirection. The stranger gets the hint. He gathers his spoons and heads off, not chased or shamed, just gently folded into the way things are done. Later, you see him again. He has a new smile, an official-looking paper tucked into his belt, and a designated spot for his cloth, conveniently located in the shade. The day has room for everyone, it seems, once you've paid your dues and said hello to the rules. You find yourself standing by the guild chest. It's made of dark, serious wood with iron corners, a box that looks like it could hold a small storm. The steward rests a hand on it, a brief, familiar touch, as if reminding himself of accounts, feasts, small loans, and all the lines he'll have to write in his ledger that night. He's chatting with an older woman whose spindle points a silent, accusing finger at the space between them as she talks. Even when she laughs, the spindle never stops turning. The guild isn't a building, it's this. A non-stop conversation about fairness, tools, funerals, and the ever-fluctuating price of oil. Deeper in, the great vaulted ceiling of the Times, Bedtime Times, gathers all the commerce into a low thunder, like a storm that never quite breaks. The guards at the door look right through you, having already calculated that you don't look like you have the energy to pull off a heist. Inside, a goldsmith lifts a fragile leaf of gold with his breath alone, laying it on a cushion as if it were the back of a sleeping bird. A buyer's voice is a low murmur. The price he offers lands on the velvet and just sits there. The goldsmith places a tiny weight beside it, not to argue, just to align their realities. It's the most polite, high-stakes poker game you've ever seen. In a sharp slice of sun between two roofs, you witness a belt-tying ceremony. A young man stands ramrod straight, while an older man loops a simple sash around his waist, tying a knot you can't quite follow. There's no drum roll, no trumpet fanfare, just a hand on a shoulder, a few quiet words, and a piece of cloth. The belt says it all. Asterisk. You are responsible now. You will hold the tool correctly. You will not rush, even when idiots who don't know this lane would be impressed by your speed. Asterisk. You think about what would finally break you here. It wouldn't be the haggling you've grown to love that part. It's the sheer, relentless patience required to do one small thing perfectly, all day long, and to find satisfaction in that correctness without a single round of applause. The city asks for a kind of collective modesty, and the reward is that doors open smoothly, bread weighs what it's supposed to, and a seam meets itself without a pucker. You feel a new weight settle on your shoulders, the strange lightness that comes when you realize you aren't the center of your own work. The tool is. When you finally leave the lane, you take it with you. Your hands feel like they've been holding a measuring tool for hours, but they're empty. You pass a fountain where a boy is stacking wooden cups, largest to smallest. He steps away, and you find yourself thinking that, yes, that is exactly how they should be stacked. It's no longer a choice. It's courtesy. It's habit. It's the quiet relief of an order that asks for nothing but your consent. You give it without a second thought and walk on. You step into the hall and the light gets heavy. The street noise gets squeezed through the doorway like toothpaste, then vanishes, leaving you in a space where sound just climbs and circles. No shouting required. Stone ribs crisscross the ceiling like the bones of a gentle giant. Small windows drop squares of sunlight onto the floor like golden tiles. You know, instantly, that this is a place for valuables. The very air seems to be handling itself with care. The guards at the entrance are less bouncer, more full stop. One of them has a ledger open on a stool, its page marked with a cord. He dips a pen, writes a line with the urgency of a glacier, and blots it with sand. A man bustles in with a parcel wrapped in blue cloth, gives a nod, and gets one back. The hall's cool temperature takes him in, and he acclimates like he's easing into a cold pool, slowly, and with a healthy dose of respect. Stalls line the walls, each one a neat little universe of its own. A jeweler, with a puff of breath, lifts a chain so fine it's practically a rumour and lays it on a black touchstone. He draws it across, leaving a faint golden streak. He's not looking at the line itself, but times it, reading the gold like it's a scandalous bit of gossip. At his elbow sits a set of plum-sized brass weights, worn to a dull glow by centuries of fingers. He doesn't boast or pitch, he just nods, a silent, "I told you so" to the universe. Across the way, a merchant unfurls a bolt of silk onto a table polished to the sheen of an old violin. The fabric spills and pools like liquid light. You lay your fingertips on the edge, and the cloth settles around them, a cool, silent greeting. The merchant murmurs a place name, Bursa, maybe somewhere even more exotic, and you nod. speaking the universal language of "I'm impressed, but also probably broke." He smiles at your restraint. It's the right vibe for the room. A boy navigates the islands of light on the floor, carrying a tray of tea that hums a tiny metallic song when it tilts. He hands out the small cups like he's dealing a very calm, very quiet game of poker. He stops at a money changer's desk where coins are stacked in shy little piles. Silver axe and a gold sultani winking like a secret. The changer's scales are as delicate as a surgeon's tools, and he seems to trust them far more than he trusts anyone's face. You pause at a display of tooled leather, the patterns coaxed into the hide. The maker turns a piece over in his hands, listening with his fingertips for a sound he can't possibly hear. He measures not with rulers, but with a kind of muscle memory passed down through generations. You raise your eyebrows in a question, and he launches into a quiet line about the tanning season, about water and bark and patience, as if explaining how to bake a year out of a single day. The bargaining, when you finally see it, is less a negotiation and more a form of interpretive dance. A buyer names a number, letting it float in the air. The seller counters with a significant pause. In that silence, an entire mental spreadsheet is consulted. Supply chains, pirate rumors, the mood of the Sultan's favorite cat. A new number appears, slightly higher. Nobody's offended. The two numbers hang there for a moment, seeing if they can be roommates. They can. Hands are shaken. A parcel is tied. Much later, the ledger at the door will note that something changed hands, without anyone breaking a sweat. In a corner, a goldsmith hammers a piece of gold into a leaf so thin it looks like solidified light. Each tap is a careful step on a journey with no particular destination. He lifts the finished sheet with his breath to keep it from tearing. The hammer's rhythm is slower here than in the main bazaar. This is the pace you use when working next to things that have a high-strung personality. You start to notice how the hall maintains itself. A man with a twig broom sweeps not dust, but the memory times of dust. Another tends to the lamps, even though it's broad daylight, checking wicks because you can never be too prepared. A woman's voice, low and clear, asks about a clasp. Two men listen to the answer as if it holds the key to the universe, and maybe it does. Their faces shift just a fraction, a look of men who have just leveled up but are trying to play it cool. A cloud must be passing overhead because the room darkens for a second. In that instant, it hits you. The steadiness of this place is the city's indoor voice. The light can change, but value holds firm. You're not stunned by the wealth. You're soothed by the fact that the wealth has been told to sit down and behave itself. A traveller, new to this world, opens a case of tin-rimmed mirrors. You can tell he's a rookie by the way the guard's eyebrows twitch. The steward of this section, a man who runs this corner like a tiny, well-mannered government, approaches with a welcoming but instructional tilt of his head. A few quiet words, a half bow, a gesture toward a slightly more shadowed spot. By the time the man sets up his case again, the mirrors look like they've been paying rent for years. The tea boy appears moments later, basically anointing the new arrangement with caffeine. Around noon, the energy in the room doesn't dip, it just settles. You find a bench and just sit. The jingle of coins in your own pocket feels less like a problem to be solved and more like just a fact. You haven't bought a single thing, yet you feel like you've taken part in an ancient system where browsing is just as respectable as buying. To your left, a man tests a clasp, opening and closing it until its little spring gives up being shy. To your right, A seller wraps a parcel, tying a knot that looks like it has a degree in engineering. He holds the finished package in both hands for a moment, as if calming a fussy baby, before passing it over. You could sit here all day and absorb a whole novel's worth of stories without a single word being spoken. When you finally leave, the guard at the door makes another unhurried note in his ledger. He doesn't look up. The Times, Bedtime Times, already has your file. Outside, the day is offensively bright, and the street is a chaotic mess of noise. But your ears have learned a new trick: how to filter. The weight of that vaulted ceiling still feels like a firm, kind hand on your shoulders. You carry its lesson with you. That real value isn't loud. It's made quiet and ordinary in careful rooms, built by people who agreed, a long, long time ago, that some things are worth doing right. You find the door by the warmth of voices. The room isn't large. Benches line the walls, and low tables hold cups the size of small fists. The air is thick with cardamom and roasted bean, a sweetness drifting from a brazier where a pot, a Times sesve, Times nests in sand that holds its heat like an old promise. A wedge of light slices through the dimness, finding the steam that rises from a mouth of copper. No one speaks loudly. The murmur of conversation forms a second roof beneath the real one. You find a seat near a corner post, the wood polished smooth by hands that have worried and wondered while they listened. The brazier breathes, a soft, constant sigh. A man with a steady wrist tilts the pot, letting a ribbon of coffee as thick as ink slide down the inside of a cup. He pauses as the foam rises, then pours again as it settles. He sets the cup on a saucer and slides it toward you. It arrives without a sound. You lift it, hold it under your nose, and the whole room seems to lean in, as if the scent itself were an invitation. Across from you, a storyteller. The Times, Times, rests a stick against his knee and watches the cups make their slow rounds. He clears his throat, just once, and the room answers by hushing itself. He offers a small, closed-lipped smile, the kind a host gives when guests have arrived on time. His voice begins not at the start of a tale, but in the middle of a scene, and your body instinctively settles, ready to receive it. The names don't matter yet, you realize. Only the tempo. Tonight's tale is a gentle one about cleverness. Found in a market, a small kindness returned at an unexpected hour, a letter that travels more safely tucked under a loaf of bread than in a sleeve. The Times Times plays two parts, simply by turning his head and shifting his voice, the way a shadow puppeteer might turn a wrist to angle the light. The room's laughter comes like soft rain on a canvas awning brief, welcome, and then stops of its own accord. No one claps, they just breathe. Your cup has cooled just a little. The coffee is darker than you expected, holding to the tongue with a quiet authority. You taste smoke, a little earth, and beneath it all, a clean bitterness that seems to gather your thoughts and set them in a neat row. This isn't a drink for hurrying through. It's a thing to hold and return to. A small dish of water sits beside it, a kindness to the palate from the man who poured. Near the door, a backgammon board leans against the wall, its points marked in pale triangles. Two men move their stones with the fierce concentration of people aligning planets, not fortune. The dice are quiet in their cup. When they fall, they sound like seeds shaken in a paper twist. There is a deep pleasure in the pattern, in the pause before each move. The room seems to share in that pause, then resumes its own quiet thinking. On a high shelf, an army of cups rests upside down. Beside them, a jar of cardamom, a tin of sugar, a bundle of small spoons tied with thread. The keeper of the house wipes the rim of the brazier with a cloth that knows its job intimately, then tucks it into his belt. He glances from the doorway to the window, seeming to measure the draught and the flame in his head. The sand sighs as he settles the pot deeper within it. You learn a new kind of patience just from watching his hands. Someone mentions a new decree, not to argue, but in the way one might mention the weather. Apparently, some jurists have doubts about these rooms, while others defend them as places where poetry and courtesy find an easy chair. Heads nod. A man adds a line about past seasons, when houses like this were asked to close, only to reopen when the city began to miss its own murmur. The talk changes nothing. The cups remain still, the foam settles, and the times Meda's time stick taps once, like a full stop. When the story pauses for a breath, two friends lean toward each other, exchanging a few words about a boat leaving at dusk. They don't plan exactly, they align. A boy returns with a brass tray and collects empty cups as if he were picking apples gently, in the order of their readiness. He tips the saucers so the grounds slide to a corner, and the cups make a clean, satisfying clink as he nests them together. You trace a small wet circle on your saucer with a fingertip, watching the light catch the line. In a far corner, a man unrolls a scrap of paper. He copies a verse from a book with a reed pen he's sharpened against a pebble, kept for this very purpose. He blows on the ink once, then leaves the page open on the table, as if to let it dry honestly. The storyteller picks up his thread again, ties it to the new silence, and the room moves with him, small boat after small boat joining the current. Not every coffee house offers this same quiet. You've passed doorways where music spills into the street, where hands slap the backgammon board with good-natured finality, where the smoke is so thick it becomes another kind of wall. Here, the wall is made of listening. A woman steps in, buys a packet of ground beans for her home, and leaves with the efficiency of someone who has 10 other stops to make before nightfall. Her presence is both ordinary and welcome. The door closes behind her like a page being turned. The Times, Meda Times, finishes not with a flourish, but with a simple line that returns the room to itself. There's a collective exhale. A few coins change hands. A hat is lifted and set down again. The keeper wipes the lip of his pot and rakes the sand, tending a small garden only he can see. You drink the last sip thick with grounds, sweetened by time, and place your cup upside down on the saucer, letting the final drops draw a map that, for fun, someone might later read. When you stand, your legs remember the softness of the bench. Outside, the street has tilted toward evening. The window's wedge of light is narrower now, and more golden. You carry the room's murmur with you, out into the lane. A warmth behind the breastbone, a string tied around the rest of your day to keep it from unraveling. If you could not last a day here, it isn't because the hours are hard, but because they ask you to belong to them completely, one room at a time, with all your senses consenting. Afternoon thins, settling into that hour when shadows begin plotting the night. The timber-framed streets lean in, their eaves nearly touching, casting a delicate lace of shade over doors worn to a low gloss by countless palms. It makes you walk softer, as if the very wood is listening. The air is thick with the scent of pitch from the beams and awning ropes, while smoke from a distant hearth scrawls a message in a tiny hand above the roofs. With every step, a silent acknowledgement. Here, warmth is both a comfort and a risk. Men carry ladders as if they were delicate instruments. Hooks, longer than the men who wield them, rest against a wall, their iron tips dark from use. A line of buckets hangs from a row of pegs, silent and patient as bells waiting to be rung. The lane breathes out in front of a communal oven, then squeezes tight again around a corner. There, a watchman leans, tilted like a man who has perfected the art of looking for smoke without ever seeming to look. His coat is plain, his belt holding a short staff, and a whistle, a sound you hope to avoid today. It's the way people handle flame that catches your eye. A woman lifts a pot from a brazier, the cloth in her hand folded thick against the heat. When she sets it down, she cups the glow with a lid, quieting it. A boy ferries a lamp from a shelf to a windowsill, shielding the tiny flame from the flirtatious dance of a hanging tassel. A man at his doorway cools a stray coal, then stamps it into nothing. Even where pleasure lives, care sits beside it with one hand on the table. At a corner, a bucket brigade waits in pieces. It's not a brigade yet, just the buckets, strung along a fence like a sentence waiting for its verbs. Their very spacing tells the story. Well, fountain, oven, cross lane, the gaps are the precise measure of the bodies that will one day stand shoulder to shoulder should the dreaded word ever pass up the slope. Strangely, the sight isn't alarming, it's calming. Preparedness, it seems, is its own kind of lullaby. From a mosque's minaret, a figure pauses a moment longer than prayer requires. The high perch, perfect for reading the wind and the roof lines. Across the water, Galata's steady stone tower has eyes too. There are men in high places whose job it is to know which way the smoke would run, to choose which lane to open, which wall to break, which shop to sacrifice so the others might stand. Making a gap at the right moment is a grim art, one the city hopes it never has to practice. The watch changes without ceremony, just one hand meeting another over a staff. It's not a baton of power, but a key to a specific kind of attention. You find yourself falling into their rhythm, a pace that counts doorways, notes the state of shutters, and listens through wood for the slightest hint of carelessness. A coppersmith's brazier has been banked early. A baker's paddle is at rest. A rope holds a door just so, preventing it from slamming against a lantern placed to warm its hinges. You never knew a hinge could be warmed. Apparently it can. It keeps them from complaining in the winter. Your feet begin to learn the map of wells, the spots where a fountain sits at the junction of two lanes, allowing water to be carried both ways at once. You see where carts are forbidden after dusk, and where rooftops kiss too closely for even a sparrow to pass. The watchman's eyes linger for half a breath on a shutter that's new to him. He'll ask later who lives there now, not to pry, but to fold another name into the ward's living knowledge of itself. In a square the size of a heartbeat, a stack of hooks waits. One is notched in a way that hints at a story, something involving a stubborn beam and 3 men in shirt sleeves during last year's heat. The notches aren't badges of honor, they're reminders of where to bite, should the biting need to be done again. You lift one a few inches off the stone and set it down. Its weight is a command. Be certain before you call for me. You promise you will. The light deepens. A man walks by with a small lantern on a pole, using it to write the names of the streets in light on the undersides of the eaves. He doesn't have to. You get the sense he just likes to. A boy follows, answering any dog that barks with a whispered snatch of song. The air carries a whiff of fresh tar from a boatyard on the Golden Horn. The day is closing down, and something in the wind feels like the water is resting its arms on the banks to watch the city shut its eyes, one by one. When fire is mentioned, it's spoken of like the weather. Dry today. Winds turning. Keep the lid on. Bank your coals. The words are like sand poured carefully around a spark. A man ties a rope shoulder high across an alley. a simple barrier to stop a cart from running thoughtlessly into a children's chalk game. He ties the knot with 2 fingers. No need to test it. The knot knows its job. At the end of your lane, someone lights an evening lamp with a splinter from a larger stick, then carries that stick outside to a safe wall, letting it sigh its last wisp of smoke into the air. Across the way, a woman scatters water on her doorstep with a flourish that is half sweeping, half blessing. Damp dust won't leap at your heels with a hidden spark. An officer passes the name for him. Asterisk, Subashu asterisk, settles in your mind with 2 men who split off to walk a parallel lane. He doesn't bark orders, he just nods, his coat saying the rest. He stops at a door where a window has been left open and murmurs a sentence you can't hear. A hand gratefully draws the shutter closed, and the officer moves on. Here, orders are often just reminders. The city prefers to be told what it already knows. To your right, a stack of new timbers for construction lies under a wetted canvas. A boy patrols the edge with a cup, dribbling water where the canvas has lifted. The act feels less like fear and more like a deep respect for the way wood secretly desires fire. The people of this street have a treaty with that desire. They give it purpose, in the oven, in the bath, and under the kettle, but they deny it any privacy. You can almost see the story that would unravel this perfect day. A north wind, 3 houses built too close on the hill, a spark pretending to be ash, a murmur in the lane that swells to a shout. Then the hook coming down, the gap opening, the slap of a bucket against a thigh, the line forming hands that lift, pass, until the moon rises to confirm that the city has kept its promise to itself. You imagine the bone-deep weariness afterward, the kind that lets you sleep on stone, and how proud that exhaustion would feel. Evening arrives as if it's been thoroughly briefed. A distant bell marks one kind of time. A nearby call to prayer marks another. They are not rivals. The doors in your lane seem to inhale and exhale the last of the day's heat. Someone laughs, and the sound catches in a window lattice, tumbling down into something softer. You turn a corner, and the smell of the sea returns, carrying with it a quiet confidence that if a flame should speak tonight, it will be answered by people who have been practicing their reply their entire lives. You stop beneath a wooden balcony, admiring the joinery. The pegs turned, so their grain runs opposite the beams, the bracket carrying weight in a gentle curve, the modest carving that makes the street a friendlier place after dark. You touch the post, and it feels warm, as if it's holding the last of the sunlight before letting it go. If you couldn't last a day here, it would be from forgetting this one simple thing. That wood remembers, and that memory demands a certain courtesy. When the first true night wind strolls down the lane, the lanterns bow and recover. A watchman's voice recedes down the slope, a thread of sound you could follow if you needed to, but you don't. You've learned the route by heart now, by the hanging buckets and leaning hooks, by the wells, and by the doors that know how to care for their own hinges. The wooden city, and you have exchanged promises. You keep yours by walking home slowly. Listen, before you ever read this city, you hear it. A greeting in Ottoman Turkish, rounded and measured, rises from a doorway, answered in Greek from the window next door. 2 boys murmur an argument in Armenian before it dissolves into laughter that needs no alphabet at all. On a stoop, an old man hums a Ladino refrain, the vowels warm, the tune as careful as someone carrying a full bowl of water. This street is a single page with 4 hands writing at once. At a corner stall, a scribe sits behind a low table, reeds trimmed and fingers inked. He writes on butter-coloured paper, in a Times Nask Times hand, so steady it looks like a leisurely walk. When a merchant needs a note copied in the faster, more elegant Times italic asterisk, the scribe simply rinses his pen, turns the fibre, and his line changes its gait without ever losing its calm. For the accounts, a man from the trading house requests Times siakat asterisk, a tight, secretive script designed to keep numbers from getting any funny ideas. Letters hide in that hand the way coins hide their faces in a purse. The initiated can read them, but the merely curious cannot. Lean in. You can smell the ink, a patient blend of oak gall, iron, and a little gum arabic waiting in its well. The pen's nib is split by a hair's breadth. As it touches the page, a tiny wet shadow follows the stroke for a second and then vanishes. To keep the line honest, the scribe sprinkles sand from a seashell, tips the sheet, and listens with his fingertips for any lingering damp. Then he ties the paper with a red thread, as if dressing a thought for a long journey. A seal waits in soft wax. A name presses down and lifts away, leaving behind a small certainty. Hop on a ferry to Galata, and the story continues in different letters. Signs cut in Greek hang above a shop selling rope, with a smaller line of Ottoman text tucked underneath. In a side street, an Armenian printer's apprentice carries a tray of type, each tiny metal slug a weighted promise. He walks with the careful balance of a man holding a new alphabet. In another quarter, a rabbi shows a boy how Ladino, written in Hebrew letters, can carry a grandmother's proverb from her mouth straight to his own ear. The boy shapes the sentence twice, once for the sound and once for the script. In a Times Mekteb asterisk, a primary school room bright with woven mats and the steam of children's breath, the learning is a gentle rhythm. A teacher's reed taps a margin, never a knuckle. He draws a line, and the children copy, their bodies leaning left, following the current of the script. It's not a military drill. It's more like the rhythm of the Times, hammam asterisk, or the dip of an oar. Repeat, rest, repeat. Small corrections are made without a single scold. Out in the lane, a Greek grandmother counts figs into a cloth, using a pattern of numbers far older than any coin. A young woman from across the way adds her own count in Ottoman, and the two sums meet in the bag without a quarrel. At a Times Khan asterisk, a courier with his back to a pillar waits for a letter to be sealed. He has the look of a man who knows the fastest ferry at low tide and the most lenient guard at the city gate. His pouch holds messages in 3 different scripts. He can read 2 of them and knows just the person to ask about the third. When he drinks his tea, he sets the cup down and covers it with his palm as he listens, as if saving the warmth for the words he's about to hear. The innkeeper nods to him with the same respect he gives the man who sharpens knives. Both are trusted to carry the city's sharpest edges. Closer to the palace, a chancery clerk walks with a roll of paper tucked under his arm like a slender loaf of bread. Unfurl it, and you'd find the practiced grace of Times. Divana asterisk, the official script, designed not just for beauty, but to be stubbornly resistant to forgery. A senior official lifts a magnifying lens to inspect a sum that curves like a fishhook. He smiles, admiring the elegance of security. The clerk's sandals on the cobblestones make a sound as modest as the numbers he carries. Someone hands you a letter. You hold it for a moment. The fold is neat, the seal unbroken, and you realize this city runs on quiet proofs. A mark, a script, a line that holds its width, a corner dusted with sand. A woman in a headscarf touches the seal on a letter from her brother. She doesn't open it here. She brings it to her temple, then to her heart, and tucks it away to be read later, where the words can be properly heard with tea, perhaps, and a window cracked open. This isn't ceremony, it's literacy as an act of tenderness. In a shop near the Grand Bazaar, a man sells paper by weight, not by the sheet. He lifts a stack, judging it with his fingers, before confirming on a small balance. And you're reminded of bread and scales, of how fairness finds a way to rhyme across all trades. Some sheets are from far away, some are local, some whisper when you shake them, others snap. He smiles when a boy asks for a scrap to practice his signature. He tears off a piece, just the boy's size, and draws a line for him to copy. The boy says his own name as he writes it, the letters following the sound like feet following a friend through a crowd. You start to think about how many tongues the city keeps folded inside itself and how rarely they bite. When they do, the wound is usually from a story, not a mouth a report, twisted sharp, a rumor that ran too far, but the city knows the cure. The coffee house will soothe it with grounds and a better tale. The mosque courtyard will smooth it by asking for a slower breath. The market will simply weigh it on a scale. Here, words have kinder places to go than the street. A priest passes, a dark, leather-bound book in his hands, its letters marching to a different discipline. He doesn't flinch at the call to prayer that will soon rise from the minaret. He's lived with it his whole life, and can tell from the first note if the muezzin has a cold. An imam steps aside, letting the priest pass through a narrow gate without having to turn his book sideways. They don't exchange words, they make room. It's the original language. As dusk settles, a storyteller in a coffee house ends his tale with a proverb that has a twin in 3 of the languages spoken in the room. People smile, not just at the different words for the same truth, but at the small differences that keep friendships from becoming mirrors. You lift your cup and read your future in the grounds for fun, laughing at a pattern that looks like both a fish and a boot. A boy asks you what it says. You tell him, it says to rest. He nods, approving of your translation. Walking back up the hill, you see a sign woven like a carpet from Arabic letters. Beneath them, a Greek line runs as clear as a path, and in the corner, an Armenian monogram is tucked away. You don't need to go inside to know the shop sells thread and gossip, and that both are measured fairly. You carry the city's voices in your ears now, like coins in a purse that don't jingle or clash, each resting quietly in its own small pouch. Evening settles on the rooftops like a folded shawl. Down in the streets, the cobblestones finally loosen their grip on the day's heat, letting it go in small, invisible sighs. You find yourself part of a slow braid of people, all moving in the same direction, as if by unspoken agreement. Doors give up their last sliver of warmth, shutters click to a finger's width, and a boy who darted ahead suddenly remembers the evening has its own rules, returning to the anchor of his mother's hand. Lamps begin to bloom, one by one. A wick catches fire with a soft nod. 2 doorways down, another answers. At the corner fountain, a man rinses a cup and sets it to drain, lip down, in the exact spot where cups have always drained. The water sounds different now, rounder, softer in the dusk. Then, from a minaret not far off, a voice rises. It's a note you feel in your bones, long before your ears have a name for it. The ancient line that gathers people toward rest, toward prayer, toward the gentle discipline the city keeps for itself when the light thins. If it's Ramazan, you'll see wires strung between the minarets, carrying words of light. These times, Mahia times, are stitched in elegant letters that seem to hang in the sky itself, counseling patience perhaps, or blessing the bread givers, or simply wishing for health with the care of a hand writing across the stars. The lamps float, and you feel the breath in your own chest float with them. If it's the eve of Friday, another kind of quiet theatre begins. The streets become a corridor for the Sultan's procession to an imperial mosque. Men stand back, but it doesn't feel like a retreat. It's a shared respect that makes the lane itself seem to widen. You don't crowd, you don't push, you simply witness. Janissaries are present the way a well-made hinge is. You don't notice them, but everything moves perfectly around them. Paused horses breathe out clouds, leather creaks, and a standard tilts not a shout, but a sentence written upright on cloth. The vendors have tuned their voices to the hour. A man selling Times Helva Times calls out with a sweetness that doesn't cling. Another arranges his dates, so the lamplight catches their skins, turning them into a line of tiny amber moons. Sherbet sellers tuck their cups into rings on their trays, like a row of neat thoughts, a sprig of basil in the main jar, because basil makes water smell a little like a garden after dark. No one hustles. They're simply offering the evening back to those walking through it. You stand where a lane opens onto a wider street, watching families pass with the fluid coordination of boats on a calm tide. A child carries a lantern on a pole with the same earnest gravity. A scribe carries a pen. A man adjusts the shawl on his mother's shoulder with the delicate care he'd use to lift a coffee cup. A woman pauses to fix a sandal strap on her daughter's foot, and the pause is a gift to everyone nearby. A silent invitation. Asterisk. We can slow down here. We can be gentle for a moment, together. Asterisk. The mosque you approach has lamps strung along its eaves, the light forming a soft underline beneath the heavy stone. In the courtyard, hands flock to the fountain, washing with less talk than they would at noon. Water beads on forearms as sleeves are rolled and smoothed. Shoes are left in pairs, a congregation of respectful listeners. The air smells of warm dust finally turning cool, of oil in the wicks, and of a pastry someone, somewhere, has brought for after the prayers. Inside, the great hall receives people as a field receives dew. The floor takes your footprints and immediately forgets them. The line of worshippers adjusts to make room for you, and in that simple movement, you're convinced that any amount of room could be made, if needed. The voice at the front is calm, the chorus of voices behind it, calmer still. You don't push forward. You stand near the door and hold the day still in your hands, feeling it finally settle, like a bowl that has found its table. When people emerge, their faces seem to glow from an inner light, having been turned inward for so long. Someone passes a plate of sweets, never counting how many are taken. Someone else pours water from a jug, keeping track only of which cups are empty. A boy accepts both with a seriousness that honors the giver and the gift. Between the minarets, the Times Mahia Times letters hang steady, unmoved by the wind. They don't need to move to be heard. Of course, not every night is this one. In some seasons, drums will wake you before dawn, a reminder to the fasting that their last bites are ready. In others, festival processions will turn the streets into a stage, complete with a mechanical fish that opens and closes its mouth to everyone's delight. But tonight is the quiet kind, a corridor of lamps leading to a door that doesn't swing, but breathes open and shut as people come and go. You drift along the street as if you too are a line of script being written. Letters in light, letters in feet. A seller of quince paste cuts a slice so thin it's almost a memory. handing it to a child who will recall that taste for years as the official flavor of walking at his mother's pace. Two men dissect a phrase from a sermon, arriving at the same meaning by different paths. A woman and her friend share a joke, their laughter briefly covering their mouths like veils before falling away to leave only their eyes, bright as the circles the lamps leave on the stone. When the crowd thins to the rhythm of your own footfalls, you turn into a smaller lane and find the lamps have made a narrow river of light just for you. Curtains stir in the windows, as if the houses themselves are breathing. A cat poses in a way that looks exactly like the word for cat in a language you can't read. Somewhere, a cart's hub gives a final click as it cools into silence. The quiet is so deep, you can hear the whisper of your own sleeves. You think to yourself that a person full of sharp, daytime edges wouldn't last a day here. You can't keep that kind of urgency in this light. You can't hold on to the habit of making room only for yourself. The city has its own habits to counter that. Lamps that show you where to put your feet, voices that ask for your breath more than your attention, and letters drawn in fire that tell you to be patient, not as a rule, but as a kindness. Turning, you look back one last time. The sentence of light between the minarets holds steady, needing no one to read it. The street makes its old promise, that people walking together in the quiet can be something more than a crowd. And so you walk on, under the soft underline of the eaves, the shawl of evening on your shoulders, a procession of one who knows they are not alone. Night has a way of blurring the city's sharp edges, leaving everything with a soft, forgiving center. You find yourself back at the water, your steps quieter now that the day has knocked the bravado out of your stride. The landing dock looks humbler at this hour, the lamps picking out only the essentials: a cleat, a coil of rope, a wooden post worn smooth by 1,000 other hands. The air is a cocktail of salt and a hint of iron. Across the water, the opposite bank is a charcoal sketch of a hill, bisected by a ribbon of light where the moon has decided to lay a finger. The local boats, the kayaks, are lined up in a patient row, looking darker and sleepier than they did this morning. A boatman materializes from the seam between shadow and lamplight, appearing so suddenly you wonder if he was part of the scenery all along. He gives a single, decisive nod toward a spot in his boat, a verdict on your seaworthiness you didn't ask for, and lowers the bow so you can step aboard without it turning into an unscheduled swim. You clamber in with the cautious delicacy of someone sneaking into a library after hours. The floorboards groan, remembering the day's traffic, but accommodating your weight with a sigh. The oarlocks murmur as the oars are set, like they're being woken from a nap. With a gentle push of his heel, the boatman sends you off, letting the current make the first move. He glances up, taking in the moon, the breeze, and the tiny black triangle of a seagull on a mission. Then he pulls a long, smooth stroke, and another, and the water behind you whispers a reply, leaving pale, shimmering trails that unravel in your wake. The night air has more textures than you can name: the phantom smell of rope and tar, the damp chill of wet wood, a fine mist that's more of a suggestion than a splash, landing like a cool breath on your knuckles. He doesn't speak at first. Why would he? The night is doing all the talking. The houses along the shore hold their lamps like tiny, flickering promises. Here, a doorway glows as brightly as a freshly minted coin. There, a shutter blinks once, then settles. Further on, a minaret is a perfect, fine line drawn against the inky sky. In another direction, a church window holds a single square of gold, a quiet beacon for someone finishing a task that sleep can't rush. When he finally speaks, it feels like he's talking to the water, and you're just lucky enough to overhear. "Under the bridge, not tonight," he says, and it doesn't really matter if it's meant for you or not. He reads the currents like a scholar reads a familiar text. You feel the boat shift beneath you and instinctively adjust your shoulders, as if you're riding an animal that appreciates a rider who knows how to sit still. The oars find a deeper, quieter hum than in the daytime, a tone that won't disturb the sleeping houses on the banks. A wider ferry crosses your path, carrying 3 figures and a mysterious covered basket. Its oars make the same sound as yours, just with a slower, more deliberate rhythm. The men on board don't bother to look around. They have the night's map memorized, including its minor quirks: a stray piece of lumber drifting like a sleeping crocodile, a pocket of cooler water where an underground stream meets the inlet. You get the feeling that out here, voices are used like lanterns only switched on when absolutely necessary. Overhead, the wind shifts, and the moonlight path on the water shivers. The boatman shortens a stroke, and the bow responds instantly, as if it's learned to read your mind. Near the mouth of the inlet, the great Bosphorus inhales its own darkness, and a heavier swell speaks in a slow, deep language before falling quiet again. You pass a pier where a single lamp burns, its brass collar polished by generations of thumbs that have trusted it to light up night after night, as if it were the very first time light was ever needed. You think about the city's curfew, about the men whose job it is to gently ask the night to behave itself. Lamps are trimmed to keep flames from getting greedy. Shutters are secured, so a sudden gust can't push a curtain into a candle. The watchmen walk their beats, their sandals telling them where they are by the feel of the cobblestones. If they spot a boat, they'll do a quick head count of oars and heads, then let the darkness swallow it again. Out here, permission is a quiet thing, earned by pace and by peace. The oar dips, rises, and glistens. You rest 2 fingers on the wooden bench, not because you're scared of falling, but because it's cool. Solid temperature is part of the story the night is telling. The boatman tilts his head, listening for a sound beneath the usual symphony of water and wood. You listen too, a dog barking on a distant hill, the final sharp clack of a wooden clog at a bathhouse door, the careful lowering of a chain into a well, so as not to chip the bucket. The city is still at work, but it's the quiet work of folding itself up for the morning. Halfway across, the boatman rests his oars and lets you simply drift. The city glides past your shoulders. You spot a late-night lamp in a tailor's workshop, a figure hunched over a seam that has a deadline with the dawn. You see a doorway where 2 men share a bowl, one friend steadying the other's spoon as a shared joke threatens to cause a spill. And then you see a patch of pure darkness, where someone has decided to be completely private, a choice the night respectfully honors. You ask a question without words, and he answers by angling the boat toward a landing you'd never have noticed in the daylight. The planks here are older, the posts thicker. When the bow nudges the dock, it makes a sound like a soft sigh, as if it has finally decided to go to sleep. He holds the boat steady with a single oar blade and holds out his other hand, palm up. You place 2 coins in it. He doesn't even look. He just weighs them in his hand for a moment, as if judging the grammar of a familiar sentence, then tips them into a pouch that clinks once. You add a smaller coin, not for speed or skill, because tonight was about neither, but for the quiet way he let you drift long enough to hear the rustle of your own sleeve. He gives a tiny nod, a bare fraction of an inch, and gets the boat ready for the next person who needs to cross, maybe for no other reason than the other side is there, and the moon has made a path. Stepping onto the landing, the old wood seems to give back a little of the warmth it saved from the day. You stand there for a moment until your legs remember they belong on land. The water behind you murmurs like a friend in the next room who's promised to keep the lamp on. You walk up a lane made of shifting shadows where the circles of lantern light barely touch, the night being kind to the old seams where plaster meets wood. A woman closes a shutter, and for a heartbeat, a tiny spill of orange light paints the street, like a piece of fruit being sliced open and then quickly hidden. A cat climbs a set of stairs and vanishes into a triangle of darkness with the flawless skill of a magician. A man locks his door and rests his forehead against the wood for a single, weary breath, then turns away, his shoulders a little lighter. You pause where the lane curves back toward the water. The moon has shifted. Its path is shorter now, and you realize something about generosity, that sometimes just being shown the way once is more than enough. If you feel like you couldn't last a day here, it's because the night doesn't want you to watch it like a tourist. It wants you to meet it as an equal. It expects your silence to work just as hard as your voice did at noon. You walk the last stretch with the measured rhythm. The oars taut your legs, the boatman's patience strung between your ankles like an invisible thread. The door you're looking for has a latch that already feels familiar in your hand. The room inside has saved a little of the day's warmth for you. You don't light a lamp. You let the window hold its perfect square of sky, and you let the day end exactly as the boat ride began, with a gentle push into the quiet and a long, soft drift. The lane is a soft tunnel of wood and breath. You know the exact places where a floorboard will give a little, and where the stone underfoot answers with a cooler note. All the windows have drawn their lashes. Somewhere, a last bowl is rinsed and turned over. A cat settles on a step, as if it's been appointed to hold this precise patch of night in place. You carry the pace the city has given you, carefully, like water in a shallow dish. 2 watchmen pass, not side by side, but with a house between them, their fields of vision overlapping like careful stitches. One taps the end of his staff near a dark corner. Not a warning, just a quiet note to the lane that it has been seen. The other gives a shutter, a passing glance, and the shutter seems to learn, right then, how to sit more truly against its frame. There's a civility in the very cut of their coats that needs no announcement. When they nod, you nod back, and the simple exchange feels like being counted, kindly, and then allowed to rest. You turn toward your own door and pause, because pausing is what this hour is for. Above the lintel, a small sprig of something green is stuck behind a peg, a gentle reminder to the house that it, too, is a kind of garden. The wood of the door smells faintly of soap where your hand has polished it, season after season. Inside, the room has held on to 2 different climates, a line of cool along the floor and a sliver of warmth higher up. You stand in the middle and feel both, like holding 2 different hands at once. On the stool, your washcloth waits, softened by the day's bathing. In the bowl, the last of the morning's water is perfectly still, its surface somehow still remembering the courtyard fountain. You set a cup beside it, and the 2 objects make a natural pair, like old words that always travel together, no matter the tongue. Your body is more tired than it was at noon, but far less troubled by it. Tiredness, you realize, is a harbor now, not a storm. Outside, a neighbor knocks dust from a carpet with the gentle rhythm of someone telling a bedtime story. The sound is a small, steady heartbeat against the larger hush. Farther off, a call crosses a quarter, announcing the hour for what it is. The sound arrives rounded and softened by the buildings it passed, and then it takes its place on your shelf, right next to your cup and your cloth. Information, you decide, should always travel this way after dark. You light a lamp, shielding the tiny flame with your hand. You lower it to the wick and let it take hold. The lamp doesn't flare up, it simply accepts. You close the shutter, leaving just a finger's width of open air, a small promise to the night. In response, the room seems to settle more deeply into itself. If you were the kind of person who needed city noise to sleep, you'd be sorely disappointed. The quiet here isn't an absence of sound. It's a series of quiet agreements. Wood deciding to hold, water deciding to wait, a hinge deciding not to complain until the rains come. On the table, a piece of bread wrapped in cloth still keeps the smell of the oven. You break it, and the crust replies with a soft crackle, a memory of brass weights and of hands that never short the measure. You taste a corner with the thin slice of quince you saved from earlier, and the two flavors settle a long day without a single argument. The room seems to know when you've had enough, and you can almost feel it breathing a little slower with you. The day's quiet lessons drift back. How to join a queue where there is no sign. How to cross the water without teaching the boat a single new thing. How to speak under a great dome without waking its echo. How to carry warmth from a room without stealing it from the next person in line. And you think of why you wouldn't last here, not because the city is harsh, but because it is so deeply attentive. And a full day of that kind of attention is a heavy thing to carry if you haven't trained for it. The watchmen pass again, their voices low, the words they speak feeling more like warmth than meaning times good. Quiet, their times like blankets being tucked around the dark corners of the city. One of them pauses at your lane's well, tests the rope with a swipe of his palm, and moves on. A dog, somewhere nearby, answers him by not barking. The moon has climbed just high enough to find the top edge of your shutter. A thin strip of white light rests there, a bookmark in the night. You have no need to turn the page. This one can stay right where it is until morning. You lie down. The wooden bed remembers your weight, much like the boat did, and offers the feeling back to you, only gentler this time. Your breath finds the city's long, slow rhythm again. Call and answer, awe and rest, heat and cool, hand and weight and hand. If you wouldn't last a day here, it's only because a day is so much more than hours. It's a grammar for being with people, a language you've been learning with every sense you have, including your patience, which is its own kind of sense, too. As the oil thins, the lamp lowers its own voice. You leave it to decide when to close its eye. The last sound you notice is water moving deep inside a wall, on its way from one basin to another, one house to the next. The city, even in its sleep, gently carrying itself through the night.